It was exactly 7:04 in the morning when I realized they weren't going to say happy birthday. Not a card, not a candle, not even the dry, begrudging greeting I'd gotten in years past. My dad was already halfway through his coffee when I walked into the kitchen. My mother was loading the dishwasher, even though nothing had been cooked. I stood there barefoot, in the oversized college hoodie I still wore to sleep, waiting. Dad didn't look up. Mom didn't turn around. And then, like a punchline, she said, "There's something by the door for you." I turned, expecting, what? A gift? A letter? Maybe a boxed sweater, like the kind she used to leave on my bed when I still fit into their version of daughterhood? But it was a suitcase. My old one, the navy Samsonite with the busted wheel, zipped and standing upright, like someone had packed it carefully, like it was meant to go somewhere. "What's this?" Neither of them answered at first. Then my father stood and cleared his throat. "We think it's time you move on," he said flatly. "You're 25 now." It wasn't a conversation. It was a sentence. I looked back and forth between them, waiting for the smirk, the joke, the just kidding that never came. But they just stood there, arms crossed, faces locked, like this was the ending they'd been planning for a while. "Is this because I didn't get that job?" I asked, voice barely steady. "This is because we've done enough," my mother said. "You've had years to get it together. We can't keep waiting for you to figure out who you're trying to be." I swallowed hard. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just walked to the suitcase and grabbed the handle. It was heavier than I remembered. I left without a word. No hugs, no breakfast, no goodbye. Just the slam of the front door and the soft thunk of the suitcase wheels struggling on uneven sidewalk. I made it to the end of the block before I sat down on the curb. It wasn't just the weight of the suitcase. It was everything. I had no plan, no apartment lined up, no job offer to fall back on. I'd been doing freelance interior design gigs on and off for months. None of them paid enough for rent. My last temp gig had ended 2 weeks ago, and now this. I blinked down at the suitcase. The zipper was slightly undone. I tugged it open, half expecting to see it stuffed with random clothes or half-folded boxes of cereal. Something petty. Instead, on top of everything, there was a manila envelope. It had my name on it, just my name, written in that cursive I knew like breath. Grandma Ruby, my mother's mother. She'd passed away the year before. At the funeral, my mom barely mentioned her will. Just said, it was simple, and left it at that. I tore the envelope open with shaking fingers. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery and a key. The letter was short, her handwriting wobbled but deliberate. "My darling Rhea, if you're reading this, they've finally done what I knew they would. I'm sorry I'm not there. I always believed in you, even when they wouldn't say it out loud. There is a storage unit, Unit 7B, off of Ellesmere Avenue. The key is enclosed. Everything inside is yours. You'll know what to do with it. Happy birthday, my girl. Love, Grandma Ruby." I stared at it for a long time. People talk about lifelines like they're ropes thrown to drowning swimmers. This wasn't that. This was quieter. A folded note at the bottom of a well, reminding me I hadn't imagined being loved. I pocketed the key. Then I stood, brushed off my knees, and called the only person I knew would pick up, Trina. A former client turned friend who once told me I had a better eye than her overpriced decorator. She answered on the second ring. "Trina," I said, voice shaking. "Do you still have that futon in your office?" 2 hours later, I had a floor to sleep on. By nightfall, I'd visited the storage unit, and that's when everything changed. My name is Rhea Lowell. I'm 25 years old. I live, technically, in the back office of a wellness spa that smells like eucalyptus and quiet money, thanks to Trina's generous heart and a manager who doesn't ask too many questions. I have no apartment lease, no parents to call, and until a few weeks ago, no stable income. But I have a storage unit key. And I had Ruby. I wasn't always the invisible one. As a kid, I was loud. Too loud, probably. I made dollhouses out of cereal boxes, turned shoelaces into curtains, glued pebbles to milk cartons, and called it eco-chic. I once rearranged all the furniture in our living room at age 9, told my mother the flow was wrong. She laughed, once. Then she told me not to touch her things again. It started gradually, the shrinking. The moments when my brother, Dean, would get praised for existing while I was scolded for making things complicated. Dean spilled juice? Ah, boys will be boys. I cried after being told to clean up his mess. Don't be dramatic, Rhea. By high school, the pattern had calcified. Dean got the car. Dean got the graduation party. I got told to be more agreeable, and maybe then things would come easier. I got good at hiding how much it hurt. And then came the fracture. The event no one ever named out loud, but everyone treated like a permanent stain on my record. At 21, I fell in love. Real love. The kind where you stay up all night mapping futures on coffee shop napkins. His name was Caleb, And he was, unfortunately, 10 years older and had been our neighbor's son, someone my father hated since the 5th grade. Caleb wasn't perfect, but he listened. He believed in my design dreams before anyone else even knew I had them. When my parents found out we were together, it was nuclear. Accusations. Ultimatums. My mother cried like I'd died. My father told me Caleb was a washed-up mistake, and if I didn't end it, I could find somewhere else to live. So I left. Caleb and I moved into a sublet, lived on boxed pasta and second-hand optimism. I took whatever jobs I could, painted murals for daycares, reupholstered benches for a bodega that never paid me. I thought struggle meant we were winning. 6 months later, he ghosted. No warning, no note, just vanished. I came home to an empty apartment and rent due in 4 days. I went crawling back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else to go. They let me return. Under rules, no talk of Caleb, no more art dreams. I had to get a real job and contribute like an adult. I swallowed it, ate shame like soup, and for the next 3 years, I walked on eggshells in a house that didn't want me. I tried. I really did. Took temp jobs, saved money, nodded politely, but no matter what I did, I was always one breath away from being dismissed again. And then came my 25th birthday. That suitcase, that door, that letter. When I got to Unit 7B, my hands were shaking. The lock clicked open with a quiet snick that felt impossibly loud. I lifted the metal door and blinked in the dim light. It wasn't full, not cluttered, just a few boxes, a tall trunk, and one large easel draped in a white sheet. I peeled back the cloth. It was one of my childhood designs, framed, preserved. A colored pencil sketch I did at 12 of a healing house with wide windows and hidden nooks. I didn't even remember giving it to Grandma Ruby. But she remembered. Inside the trunk were files, business papers, a binder with my name on the cover and a tab labeled Client Leads, Ruby's Friends. Contacts, notes, referrals, budgets. At the bottom of the trunk was a small envelope with a bank logo. My hands trembled as I opened it. A cashier's check. $15,000. Made out to me. There was a note attached. I know you won't ask for help, Bria, so I'm giving it anyway. This is for the dream they don't see. Use it wisely. Make something that matters. Love, Grandma R. I sat on the concrete floor and cried. Not because of the money, but because someone had believed in me so much, they planned for my exile before it happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up reworking my old business plan. It had been sitting dormant on my laptop for months, a skeletal outline for a solo design studio focused on transitional spaces, tiny apartments, group housing, recovery centers, spaces for people trying to rebuild, people like me. I called it Second Room Studio. By morning, I had a list of things to do: set up the LLC, buy materials, update my portfolio, build a basic site. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I had what I hadn't had in years: a start. Trina connected me to her friend who ran a youth shelter. They want to redo their intake room, she said. Nothing fancy, just less depressing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was building. The intake room was beige, not in the calm, neutral way, in the cheap, rented tile kind of way. Fluorescent lighting that made you squint. 3 cracked vinyl chairs, a crooked bulletin board, and a coffee table that had once been white but now bore the scars of countless scuffed sneakers and forgotten pens. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, pretending I wasn't terrified. The woman in charge, Alondra, was kind but brisk. Early 40s, heavy under-eye circles, lanyard of keys jingling like a wind chime of exhaustion. We're not expecting magic, she said, just something less soul-crushing. I nodded. I can do that. She squinted at me. You're young. Most spaces don't care how old you are, just how you make people feel when they walk in, she smirked. Fair point. She gave me a 2-week window and a $900 budget. I stretched it like taffy. Swapped the chairs for low-profile modular seating I found at a thrift shop and reupholstered in washable gray. Added sheer curtains, string lights, a rotating wall gallery for the kids to post their own drawings. I painted a giant half-circle behind the main desk, terracotta, warm, safe. It looked like a sunrise sneaking through a heavy morning. Alondra stood in the doorway when I finished. She didn't say anything for a minute, just looked. Then she said, "It feels like it was waiting to be this all along." I wanted to cry. Instead, I just nodded and started packing up my brushes. What I didn't expect came 2 days later. A social worker who'd seen the room posted a before and after photo on LinkedIn. I didn't even know until Trina texted me at midnight, "Girl, you're viral." The post had 10,000 likes and counting. Comments from nonprofit directors, therapists, shelter staff from across the country asking, "Who did this, and can we talk?" The next morning, my website crashed from traffic. I hadn't even finished the contact page. I I spent 3 days emailing strangers, setting up calls, telling people, yes, I was available, yes, I worked solo, for now, and yes, I'd love to collaborate. One call came from a woman named Nora, who ran a transitional housing nonprofit in Denver. We just got a grant, she said. We want someone to help us rethink our entire intake process, not just the forms, the space, the feeling. I think you get that. I booked a ticket for the next week. When I told Trina, she screamed into a pillow and then offered to drive me to the airport. She'd been letting me stay in the office for a month at that point. You can keep crashing here when you get back, she said, but something tells me you won't need to. She was right. In Denver, I spent a week walking through the facility, talking to clients, sketching ideas, sleeping 5 hours a night. On the last day, Nora handed me a folder. Inside was a contract offer, a 6-month paid consulting gig, flexible hours, full creative input. Enough to move out, start fresh, maybe even hire someone. When I called to tell my mom, I paused halfway through dialing and hung up. Instead, I emailed her. Subject line, in case you wondered, message, I'm in Denver. Working on a design project for a housing program. You can see some of the photos online. Also, I found Grandma Ruby's letter. Thank you for packing it, Rhea. The reply came 2 days later. No greeting, no apology, just, we didn't know she left you anything. Good luck. I read it 3 times and then deleted it. I didn't need luck. I had a name, I had a studio, and somewhere in that first storage unit was a ceramic lamp with hand-painted flowers that Grandma Ruby used to keep on her nightstand. I plugged it into my new apartment the day I moved in. The light was soft, familiar, steady. I wasn't supposed to survive, let alone thrive. That was the silent subtext of every word my parents hadn't said on my birthday. That I was a failure, an embarrassment. That sending me off with a suitcase was a mercy. That if they pushed me hard enough, I'd vanish into someone else's problem. But I didn't vanish. I built something instead. By month 5 of the Denver contract, Second Room Studio was in active talks with 2 other nonprofits, one in Austin, one back home in the same city where I had been packed away. A local journalist wrote a feature titled Designing Dignity, How One Woman is Reimagining Recovery Spaces. They used my photo, a quote, and a direct mention of my design theory. I don't just want to make places pretty. I want to make them possible. People don't change inside cold rooms. They change when the room reminds them they're still human. I wasn't prepared for how wide it would travel. Someone at a university shared it. A podcast picked it up. One afternoon, I got a DM from a woman at a domestic violence shelter saying, "Your spaces gave me a way to breathe again." The article made its way to my hometown. I know this because Trina forwarded me a Facebook post from someone in our old neighborhood group chat. Is this Rhea Lowell? The girl from Pine Ridge? She's famous now. The comment thread was a snake pit of curiosity, shallow praise, and nostalgia-soaked ignorance. But then came the text. From my brother, Dean. Dean, saw the article. That's wild. Mom and Dad, they were surprised. Dad keeps asking how you pulled it off. It was such a short message for so much buried history. I typed and deleted 3 responses before sending. Me. I didn't pull it off. I worked. I healed. I didn't wait for their permission to exist. He didn't reply. But the next week, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Played it an hour later. My father's voice, gravelly, paused too often. Rhea, read the article. Your mother and I are, well, we didn't know what you were working on. Clearly, it's something important. Good. Maybe we misjudged things. You know how we are. He coughed. We're having a small dinner next weekend. Just us and Dean's family. If you're in town, maybe come. I stared at my phone. My hands were steady. I wasn't angry, not in the way I thought I would be. I was just finished. I called Trina instead. Should I go? She exhaled. Do you need anything from them? No. Then you already have your answer. Still, I went, not for them, for the closure I'd earned. They lived in the same house, same beige siding, same potted plants out front. When I knocked, my mother opened the door and blinked like I was a ghost. She didn't hug me. She stepped aside. Dean was there, his wife and toddler too. The table was already set. Roasted chicken, potatoes, wine. I sat, I smiled. The dinner was polite, tense around the edges. They asked surface questions. I gave surface answers. Until my father said, "We saw the lamp in one of the pictures. Ruby's, right?" I nodded. She left it for me. He looked down at his plate. She always said you had her heart. No apology, no confession, just that. Still, something shifted. After dinner, Dean walked me to my car. He stood awkwardly by the driver's side. You're doing something real, he said. That's more than I can say. I smiled gently. We all do what we can. He nodded. Don't disappear again. I never did. I drove back to my apartment, where the lamp glowed beside a stack of blueprints. The suitcase they gave me still sat in the back of my closet, But it didn't feel like exile anymore, it felt like a start. The apartment I live in now isn't big. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, exposed brick I didn't pay extra for. The windows let in light between 3 and 4:30 p.m. if the clouds cooperate. It smells like paint samples, dry basil, and sometimes dust. But it's mine. Fully, wholly mine. The lamp sits by the entryway, Grandma Ruby's floral one, with the chip in the base from when I dropped it unpacking. I thought I'd glue it, but I didn't. That little crack feels honest, a flaw that stayed, a reminder. A month after the dinner at my parents' house, a package arrived with no note. No return address. Just a pale blue hardcover book, Designing for Recovery, Spaces That Speak Softly. My name was listed in the acknowledgments. Nora, the woman from Denver, had nominated me for a panel I didn't even know. The email came 3 days later. Congratulations. You've been selected as a featured speaker at the National Transitional Housing Summit. Travel and lodging covered. I said yes. I didn't buy new clothes. I wore the blazer I thrifted years ago, the one Caleb said made me look too serious. I liked it for that exact reason. The panel room was full, more than full. They had to bring in extra chairs. I told them what I knew, that healing wasn't sterile, that design wasn't luxury, that we shape space, and then space shapes us. I showed slides, before and afters. I spoke about color palettes like they were medicine. I showed them the terracotta sunrise behind the intake desk, the one Alondra said made kids stop holding their breath. When I finished, someone asked, "What gave you the confidence to keep going after, well, the beginning?" I thought of the suitcase, the cracked wheel, the voicemail that never said sorry. I thought of the locked unit, the note in cursive, the $15,000 that turned out to be exactly enough. So I said, sometimes you don't need a crowd. Sometimes, one person remembering you is enough to keep going. The applause was quiet at first. Then it spread like something rising, not loud, but rooted. After the panel, a woman my mother's age came up to me. She said, "My daughter's about to age out of foster care. She wants to be an artist." I didn't understand it, but now, maybe I do. Thank you. I held her gaze. Tell her she's not broken for dreaming. She nodded. Then she left. Later that night, I walked back to my hotel room alone. I didn't feel lonely. The room was small, but the lamp on the side table glowed warm. I thought about Ruby, how she must have known, even before I did, that love has a longer shelf life than pain. That belief outlasts banishment. That letter, the one she left, was tucked inside the pages of my notebook now. I read it sometimes before a pitch meeting, or when an email from a client makes me question my worth. It's not the words that help. It's the fact that they exist at all. Back home, I passed by the old suitcase on my way to bed. I almost tossed it when I moved in, but something told me to keep it. One day I'll repurpose it. Maybe turn it into a side table, maybe plant succulents in it, give it new life. But for now it stays, a symbol of the birthday I wasn't celebrated, and the life I built anyway. I don't wait for their calls anymore. If they reach out, I answer when I want to. I keep it short. Kind, but clear. Dean sends pictures of his daughter sometimes. Says she reminds him of me when I was little. Always rearranging furniture, always building forts out of pillows. That feels like a small grace. But I don't pretend everything's healed. Some wounds stay open, just smaller. And that's okay. I didn't need my parents to believe in me. I needed someone to remind me I was already real. And Ruby did that. Now I do it for others. Every room I build is a letter to someone else who's been handed a suitcase when they needed a seat at the table. They may not know it yet, but their name is already on the door. The morning after I turned 26, I stood in my kitchen watching the light move across the tile. There was no cake, no balloons, no one waiting in the next room with a camera or a surprise. But there was peace. There was me, barefoot and wrapped in a cotton robe, stirring my tea and humming an off-key song that I hadn't heard since childhood. The lamp on the side table glowed softly, the same one Grandma Ruby had left me in that storage unit, faith in ceramic form. The letter she wrote sat in a frame now, not hung up, but kept close, on a shelf in my office, next to the first ever invoice I sent under the name Second Room Studio. Some people mark time by weddings, births, or promotions. I mark mine by keys. The first, the one Ruby tucked inside the envelope with her letter, heavy with quiet intent. The second, the key to Trina's spa office where I slept for 2 months surrounded by essential oils and quiet pity I mistook for grace. The third, the key to my current apartment, handed to me by a landlord who barely looked up from his phone. He had no idea what it meant to me. That moment. That lock. That click. That door I opened and closed without needing anyone's permission. When I think about the girl I was, the one who sat on the curb with a suitcase on her 25th birthday, I want to wrap her in a blanket and say, "You won't believe who you become." I want to tell her that the ache in her stomach doesn't last forever, that the people who couldn't see her were never really looking. But more than that, I want to thank her. She didn't run. She didn't explode or collapse in the way the world expected her to. She walked. With dignity, with pain, but with purpose. I still talk to Ruby sometimes, out loud when no one's around. When a design comes together, when a client cries walking into a newly painted room, when I get an email from a stranger saying, "Your work helped me feel safe for the first time in years." I sit at my desk and whisper, "You were right." I keep her letter folded into the back of my sketchbook now. Not because I need to reread it, I have it memorized, but because its weight reminds me that sometimes the smallest act, a hidden envelope, a line of ink, a name written in cursive, can outlive an entire legacy of silence. My parents don't know most of this. They still live in the same house, in the same routines. I visited them once after the dinner, just once. My mother asked about my work, but only vaguely, like she was afraid to get the answer wrong. My father nodded a lot and offered me water 3 times. There was no apology, there was no mention of the suitcase, but I didn't expect one. What I wanted, what I needed, was no longer theirs to give. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something I owe them. It's something I give myself, quietly, each time I walk into a room I've designed, and see the look on someone's face when the space gets it. When the color calms them, when the light feels like an embrace, when they say, "This doesn't feel like a shelter, it feels like home." That word, home, has changed shape for me. It used to mean a place where I waited for acceptance. Now it means a place where I create it. I get messages now, weekly, people asking how I got started. If I'll mentor, if I'll teach a course. I say yes when I can. I tell them about peeling paint and fold-out futons, about the first $900 project, about Ruby's letter. I don't romanticize it. I don't wrap it in glitter. I just tell the truth. Sometimes I show them the suitcase. It sits at the bottom of my closet, empty now. I haven't repurposed it yet, haven't planted succulents in it, or turned it into a coffee table like I once joked about. It stays. Not as a relic, but as a record. Proof that even an exit wound can become a doorway. Dean sends me pictures of his daughter sometimes. She's learning to paint, he says, always rearranging her bedroom. Wants to turn a cardboard box into a spaceship. I smile when I see them. I see flickers of myself in her, untamed, curious, unashamed. He asked once, "Will you help me redo her room?" I said yes, not because I've forgotten the past, but because I believe in second chances. Not just for rooms, for people. For ourselves. There's one last key I haven't used yet. It came in the mail a few weeks ago. A nonprofit in Portland wants to open a women's center. They're sending a team to fly me out and consult on the layout, the atmosphere, the soul of the place. They've mailed a key to the front door already, symbolic, they said. I haven't put it on my chain yet. I hold it in my palm sometimes, feel its shape. It's not the end of the story, not even close, but it feels like a new paragraph. And as I sit here writing this in a room I designed myself, with warm oak floors, terracotta walls, and a desk facing east, I finally understand something Ruby knew long before I did. That the most powerful kind of love isn't loud or perfect or even present. It's the kind that says, "You'll know what to do with this," and trusts you to find your way. I did. And I will keep doing it, over and over, for the girl they forgot, for the woman I became, and for every person who's ever opened a suitcase thinking it meant an end, only to find a letter tucked inside, waiting to begin.